Are we
No,
good?
that's all right. I can do that. All right, so this is our Bsides Las Vegas talk on Burp.
Hey, they're talking. Listen up. If you're not, this is a big room. But if you're not in the actual talk listening, and if you're not a fucking speaker, not fucking, you should be quiet. Except for me. See the red shirts? They're big. We don't pick them for their faces, okay?
All right, so the title is Occupy Burp Suite, and kind of what we're meaning with that is we feel that there's a lot of users out there using Burp Suite to test web applications, and there's really not a lot of, you go Google extensions or tips or what people are doing with it, and there's really not a lot of information sharing out there. So I guess the whole theme of the talk is, a lot of us are using it, not very many of us are kind of sharing what we're doing with it. And hopefully we can kind of get people to motivate and help out. So I am James Lesser. I'm a consultant at IOActive. I'm also on Twitter at Infidel. And this is...
I'm Joseph Tartaro. I'm also a consultant at IOActive. You can follow me on Twitter at Drugi1XP. I'm also part of the Telefreak group at telefreak.org and irc2600.net, pound Telefreak if you're interested in any of that technology and freaking in general.
All right, so I'm not really going to get a lot into Burp Suite. I'm sure, if you're here, a lot of you know what it is. It's a tool for testing web applications. It follows kind of the basic intercepting proxy model of being able to intercept your requests and responses and allow you to view, modify, etc. of the application. It kind of for the most part, it's getting to where it's starting to offer about everything you need to test basic web application functionality. You have proxy, target, repeater, things like that, and also with you have some pretty nifty automation tools that kind of help you get your tasks done. Spidering, obviously scanning can be very beneficial. Payload testing with Intruder, I would kind of call automated, even though it's a fairly manual process to set it up. Everything is fairly, for the most part, beneficial to the everyday tester. So, what happens when you're using Burp Suite and you start testing web applications that you start realizing that there are some limitations that are preventing you to perform your test? What are your options currently as of now? These are kind of some I jotted down. One is you go run to another application and use it that probably will conduct the functionality you're looking for or some way to get around it. You can also kind of use a tool and chain it through Burp Proxy to have it, through the intercept so that it's all intercepted and in your target window. And then you can still use Burp Pro to kind of review your responses and do any other type of work with repeater, et cetera, after you have all that information populated. You can use native functionality as a workaround, right? So it might not have been its intended use for development, but after you start messing around with the tools, you're like, okay, wait a minute. If I set this setting off, and then I enable this in cookie jar, and I'll set this macro, you can start with chaining of a lot of the functionality. You can start kind of making a temporary workaround for your solution, and if none of those work, you basically start to extend the application, of course, if it's applicable. So, extending Burp.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about writing extensions for Burp. I mean, generally, when I talk to people about the process that they went through and the entire situation, it usually comes down to there was functionality that they needed to do for either a custom web app or anything along those lines, and they wanted to add that to Burp and go ahead and write an extension. And they had to go ahead and you do it in Java. You have like one Burp extender file, and it worked great. And they said, hey, we can go ahead and intercept with this. We can add functionality. We can go ahead and test better. And I'm going to go ahead and add something else. So they go ahead and hard code some more tools in there, and then they hard code some more. And then you basically are stuck with a mess. It's a very sloppy file. You can't really hand it out to people. If somebody's already using their own extension, they can't really import their or yours. They have to basically take your code, try to get to work with their code, and there's really no way to share it upon each other. And if you go on like Google and you find an extension that somebody already wrote, you're basically stuck using just their extension. And if you want to use somebody else's, you have to go ahead and kill theirs and use the second one, but not at the same time. So I guess we'll just go to limitations. So limitations, like I said, if you have multiple extensions in that one file, they're all printing to like the same console tab or the alert, and it becomes a mess, especially if you're doing something that takes user input. You can't deal with it, because if it's scrolling and printing output, the user's just going to get lost. Developing in Java obviously can take time, especially for people who aren't used to it, and a lot of the situations when we're adding extensions, we're out on the job, we're with a client or anything, and we need to get it going. We need to get something up and running for this custom web app. So obviously a scripting language would be better. And there can only be one final outbound extension. So when you go ahead and hard code all these, whenever it's making a request, there's just that one final thing that processes it, and you have no control over that. And then also, you're limited to what Daft and Portsburger give you access to. So they give you access to maybe spidering and adding stuff to scope, but if they don't give you access to something like Comparer, you can't go ahead and compare content links and look for a difference, or encoder, decoder, or sequencer. You're just stuck without that because they didn't give you access.
All right, so with that being said, we decided to kind of start creating our own little framework here. And what we wanted to do was kind of sit down and kind of look at what we want to get as far as our objectives and making our lives a little bit easier with extending Burp and using extensions within our testing methodology. So one of the first things we want to do is obviously simplify having multiple extensions running. That involves some console and alert printing organization, control over this final outbound processing. You want to make sure, let's say for instance, if you have a bunch of tools that are modifying post data and you don't have the functionality built in to check that final content link to make sure it's accurate before it pushes out, you could have an extension sitting, and it needs to be the last extension called, or if you make any modifications to the request again, that content link that it generated will not be accurate, or could potentially not be accurate. So you do need to make sure that you have control over what extensions are running for the final outbound before they're actually pushed out on the wire. And then we also want to make sure that we can kind of introduce some like individual extension configuration, right? Some extensions might need you to set values so that it can use, for what you're looking for. Do you really want to go into your code and change those values, or can we actually supply you with an input that allows you to modify it within the application itself? We also wanted to possibly leverage scriptability. Right now, there are two current methods that a lot of people are using to get some scriptability out of Burp Suite and its extensions. One of them being using Ruby, and the other one leveraging Python. And then finally, we want to have control of input-output. What are you supplying to your extension for input? Where's that output going? And basically help you have a little bit more control without having to go into your code and manually making those adjustments. So we built a framework. One of the first things we did was we wanted to utilize Jython. Jython is a Python for Java platform. You can basically look at it as like a gateway to communicate with Java through Python code. We also made it so it will dynamically find and load extensions on startup. This kind of creates a drag and drop scenario. You create your extension, you put it in a directory, you just go start Burp with extensions, and it's going to dynamically go out there, find it, and load it to kind of prevent some of that overhead and get your scripts or extensions up and running as quickly as possible. We provided a GUI interface, right? This was our method of trying to manage extensions. So instead of having everything print to a console log or the alert tab, out to a file, we have a GUI interface that you can utilize that individualizes extensions, allowing you to print to each individual extension's print tab or whatever custom GUI interface you want to provide with that extension. Last, we want to, or I'm sorry, not last here. We want to provide a method for tracking and chaining of those final outbound extensions. So we want, not only do we want that final extension, but if you do want to chain them and you're careful with chaining, we want to give you the ability to do so. And we want to give this ability on a per tool basis. And finally, we want to reduce appending additional core code in the libraries, right? So when you write an extension, you don't want to go back in your core code and start putting the instructions on how to call it and load it. We want all that self-contained within the extension that the dynamic loader goes and grabs, and that way you're not constantly appending these core library files. So basically, to kind of give you an idea of how our extension is running is, or at least starts, is on startup, Burp Suite is going to start. And one of the first things that Burp Suite does when it starts is it calls the register extended callbacks method provided by the extensibility. And what we did within this register extender callbacks, or at least one of the first things we did, was we want to go out and dynamically load and find extensions. So it's going to call our find extensions functionality, which will go through the file directory structure and actually find extensions with .py that have a class of subclass extensions so that you can actually identify that the file itself is an extension and dynamically load them and create an instance of the object and pass it back to Burp Extender or the register extender callbacks. Then the next thing that's going to do is actually make a call out to our GUI where it builds the body for the GUI, passing it all instances of extensions found. And it's going to load, at least get it prepared or set up to load. And it's going to pass all that information back with the built GUI body to Burp Extender. And then last, Burp Extender is going to make a call out to each individual extension where you would have your final code running. This is where you can add individual tabs within the GUI. You can put information as far as what the author is, what it does, so that they can actually see it built up. And then you can perform any type of functionality you would like with the app, whether it be a menu item clicked or a request response instance. And that's basically it. It's fairly simple. We wanted to make it simple so that it was easily able to adapt. You have a question?
How much overhead does that incur with that framework?
It's actually not much, right? So you obviously have a GUI built. It's built with Swing. So we're just interacting back with Java through the Jython library. The find extensions is ran once and dropped. And the nice thing about it is that it basically builds an instance of each individual extension and keeps them loaded so that you're not sitting there rebuilding and rebuilding. So it's all self-contained, everything back in Burp Extender. Everything is in sync with the parent, and then when you pass it to any other tool, it's going to have all that information so it knows what tool tab to print to, or at least each extension knows, and everything. So as far as the overhead, it can actually be a little bit easier. And if you want to try and explain it in detail.
Well, I mean, basically, like you said, when it starts up, it's going to start every instance, and it's going to associate each extension with a specific tool and store it in a dictionary. So all that's going to happen at startup, and it's just going to be sitting there. And then when the GUI goes ahead and loads, it's going to go through the dictionary, and as you click on specific list items or tabs, it's going to basically pull the correct one out. So it's not going to be like running as you click. It's all going to be right as load.
And the nicest thing is it's all done at startup. So when you actually have requests and responses being performed or you're performing tasks, all this stuff is already built and stored and ready for you to call it. So kind of with that being said, after we kind of showed you a little flow, we'd like to show you some demos. We know that there's going to be a lot of doubt with people where they're saying, hey, not only now are we learning extensions, but we also have to kind of learn your framework and how to utilize it. And that can be kind of a bit much. Why not simplify things and just do extensions? And what we want to try and show is that this is just about, it is as simple, if not more simple, to write an extension using this method with the drag and drop and everything, because all that core functionality is already built in. So we're going to try and create a skeleton sample extension for you within a couple minutes. Load it into the directory, load it up in Burp, and start it so you can actually just see that we, what 3-4 lines of code we add to a basic skeleton that we provide, you can actually be up and running with a menu click item extension within Burp. And after that, we'll try and give you like little previews of some extensions that we have already written.
Should I do the demo first, or? I think I'll just go ahead and do the demo first instead of the actual development of the example extension. So let me go ahead and start this up. And we'll supply just a bash script or a batch script, depending on if you want to do this on like a Unix, OS X, or Windows, or whichever. But this is our new GUI window that basically starts up with Burp at the beginning. And as you can see, the list of extensions are on the side that we loaded up. And you can basically choose which ones you want to do. They have their own GUI tabs and features that you can basically implement in your own code. So the first thing that basically will always be on top is the process request extension. And this one handles all those outbound requests that we were talking about that were basically a pain. So you can basically choose what tool you want to use. That's a repeater. You can hit the plus sign and add which extension you want. So we'll do our add a parameter test, and then maybe gzip it right when it's done. And then now any request through repeater, it's going to go ahead and run that code. And if I decide that I don't want that add parameter one anymore, I just remove it. And then the add parameter one, right now there aren't any options, but if you wanted to, you could basically add code to add tabs and add any functionality, and it would just basically update it live throughout the request. So let me go ahead and add something to our scope. And if you haven't used Burp, basically the request was just intercepted by the proxy. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to scope so I can start playing with it. And it's going to be right here. And as an example extension, you can go ahead and add like new buttons if you want to add a right-click menu. So we'll just go ahead and do a Google site index. And the reason we added this is because it's something simple, basic. It shows somebody how to use the framework, and it's also something that's useful. Currently, if you spider something, it would just go ahead and obviously touch anything that was linked on the internal pages and crawl through it. But what about stuff that wasn't linked that Google knows about and Google found that you don't have to actually manually add anymore? So as you can see, all the requests are going and populating. And then we can go here, and it's basically telling us what it found and what it's adding. And anything that is not in scope, it will alert you and let you know. So you can just decide from then on if you want to go ahead and add that to scope, and it will import it, or what you want to do. But the whole idea currently is the extensions will never do anything that is not in your scope. You can quickly modify that, but we didn't want to hand a framework to somebody and they go to a client, start using Burp, and their Burp's following scope, but all the extensions that we gave them are just like hitting everything. Like, we just didn't want you guys to run into that situation. So as another example, we'll go ahead and go over this drive-by SQL tester that we basically wrote, which the whole idea was, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation as a consultant where a company came to you and they're like, hey, we've been hit, we have in our database all these specific strings or whatever, and here's our logs, and there's about 20,000 requests, and you have no idea which one got through because they're all the same payloads on the same parameters, and you just don't know. So this idea is that, you go ahead and you find say like a blind SQL injection on a client, and you're like, oh, hey, here it is, proof of concept, and then they go, okay, we fixed it. You go and check, and it's like, no, you didn't fix it. All you did was sanitize the words wait for. You didn't actually fix anything. So the whole idea is that you can include a bunch of intrusive payloads, and it will just hammer it, and it will keep track of basically what requests are being made and logging it. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a fake request with parameters real quick. So I'm just going to make a test me and a test, right? And we'll go ahead and send those over. And now I can go ahead and run drive-by SQLite test. And as you can see, it's printing out the requests that it made and which parameters it modified, and it keeps a count in reality, and it basically logs it to the directory too with the current date. So when the client comes back and they're like, hey, we saw IOActive 667 in our database, we can see which exact parameter basically got through and which one wasn't sanitized. Yeah, so as you can see, let's see, test 1, 2, 3, 4, SQL payload. We didn't really give you guys real payloads. You guys can populate those yourself, but yeah, they're right there. I guess another thing would be like this payload encoder, and obviously Burp already has, it's an encoder and parser. Burp already has an encoder, so I didn't really have anything to add to it, except for like double URL encode. So a quick example, like whatever, it's more of ease for when you're doing the parsing, so you can just quickly grab it and encode it. So the parser is basically for, if you're in a situation, you've been hitting these parameters and you're like, okay, I'm trying to get this thing to pop, and everything's going through, but that damn semicolon is sanitized. I just can't get that semicolon through. You can basically just go ahead and hit semicolon, enter, and these are all payloads that aren't choosing the semicolon. And you can populate that in our directories, where we'll have a payload. You can add any directories with the names of which payloads you want and any text files, and it will crawl through and basically let you know what's there, and yeah, dynamically update it, whatever you want. So anything that obviously saves time is going to be helpful. And what's difficult about this is a lot of the extensions that we've written, we actually can't even share with you guys because one, they've been for specific clients, and two, they're probably not going to be useful because they were for a custom web application that was doing something crazy weird. But that's the whole idea, right? We're giving you stuff that might be useful, but if you're in this weird situation where, let's say, do you want to explain that one that you ran into? Yeah.
Yeah, so like a nice example, right, is which one of the cross-site request type things?
That one or that one where it took the UTC time and everything.
Okay, yeah, so if you start testing a lot of web services, you will see some pretty fascinating things with what they're doing to validate the request. And, kind of an example of what some of the people are doing are for a request, you will take UTC time of the current request, plus all the values in a parameter, maybe match that with a public cert, and hash that up in base64 it and send it along with the header. And server-side, that web service is going to basically produce the same thing. It sees what your UTC time is within its header, grabs all the values of the request that was sent in the header, matches it with its cert, hashes it, and base64s it. So it basically checks to make sure that all your values are accurate, and it was sent within like 3 seconds of the time that the request actually states within inside the base64 hash. So that's kind of a difficult thing to do with native functionality, and that's a really good example of what you would be doing as an extension. Providing valuable data to the client, at least being able to properly test their web service.
And we went ahead and included some example skeletons for you guys. There's like a simple skeleton that's going to go ahead and add right-click menu, or kind of like a little hello world. And there's also an advanced skeleton that will basically give you an idea of like using Jython and building a GUI. And it should be pretty simple to basically look at it and piece out the code that you want and go from there. And obviously looking at Java docs and everything. So you guys should be able to go ahead and take this and run with it, hopefully. That's the whole idea. And everything's dynamically loaded. So Portswigger just started up a forum, and our goal is that hopefully people can just go ahead and be like, hey, I wrote an extension, here's my quick Python file. You can open it up, look at it really quick, it's like 30, 40 lines, and just drag it in your folder, and it's going to work. You don't have to deal with any underlying framework code, you don't have to touch anything in the framework. Even if you want to write something, the only thing you have to touch is that small bit of extension code that you basically were working with. And communicating with the actual framework itself, you're dealing with like a couple lines for some API calls, and that's that's really it. Everything else is just Python. So if you're cool with Python, you're going to be good with this. So I'm just going to go ahead and, I guess, make an example you guys can watch, and he can explain it as I do it. But
Yeah, so we wanted to show you that, you know, how easily this can be done, that it's not really a lot of work to get something into the GUI working and printing at least to a GUI tab, so that you don't have it all cluttered within the console or alert functionality. So this is kind of the general skeleton that is required to get an extension up in the GUI. You can see the first class, how it's simple skeleton. It is using a subclass extension. That is what our functionality that goes out and dynamically loads extensions for. It's actually opening up each and every file, looking for this extension of subclass extension, saying, okay, you must be an extension, and it loads it up. So then you can go through and add any type of info of what the actual name is, what its usage is, author. Feel free to leave my name in it if you want. But all the code that's basically run as far as getting the GUI set up is done within this finish launching function that is originally, it's that last functionality that's called on startup by the register extender callbacks method. Right, so register menu item click is a method that has been included within the Burp extension APIs. So you can actually go view the documentation on what it's accepting and basically when it's performed. But in the short, it's performed anytime you actually click that menu item, and it's going to basically invoke the new class for the menu handler below.
I just can't type and talk at the same time. So currently right now there's just a print to log tab, and that's in our extension file, which is almost like a bridge between everything. So even if you wanted to add something to the actual framework, which if you want to add a feature, sure, go for it. Just that's where you're going to modify it. And currently, so the person just says print log tab, you click the simple example button, right? So if I want to go ahead and take this a little bit further, but I have no idea what I'm doing because this is my first time loading it, I can go ahead and look at some of the other extensions that we have here. So I'm just going to open up like this Google one, for example, right? And I see, okay, when they click the item, it goes ahead and grabs the length of the message info, and then it checks the range, and it gets the URL. So sure, let's go ahead and grab that piece of code. And I'll just go ahead and copy that in here, get rid of the stuff we're not using. And instead of calling this function that doesn't exist, obviously, because we're in a different file, I'll just print to the log tab instead. What's that? Rab. It's a tab. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and save that. Load this back up. Make a couple of requests so we get something inside of Burp. Yeah. So basically, what I told it to do was it's grabbing the message info, which is the request info, and I'm calling the get URL function. So that's just basically what I'm going to have it do is just print the URL to the log tab. You have access to the request. Which, yeah, you have complete access to the request and also the response, which whatever you want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and just, I'll just highlight all of these. And right-click, simple example menu item, simple skeleton, and it totally didn't work. Okay, so it wants a string. So basically, we'll just exit this, wrap it in a string. And reload it. And everything I put inside of a try except because I don't know if any of you guys have done any Burp development, but in that alerts tab is where all the exceptions happen. And it's a complete pain in the ass to actually see where the error happened and scrolling the window and making it larger to actually read everything. So everything should just print straight to the console log if you have an error. We'll see. So there we go. I didn't add new lines, but as you can see, it printed each URL there. So I mean, that's basically like, as you can see, it's pretty simple to piece stuff together. I guess I could add a GUI really quick if you want to hold this mic, just to show it to you. Yeah, sure.
We just want to, show you that we built a lot of functionality within our extensions. We tried to come up with ideas. Okay, we're not utilizing this functionality yet. Can we build an extension for it, right? Because we want to have examples where people can go in, look at them in Python and say, hey, okay, that's easy. I can kind of adapt that with my own functionality. I see what they're doing with the reports or with a request or how they're handling just specific method calls. So we wanted to make sure that we had all that functionality kind of built within those extensions so that you can go back, look at them, and review them. So what he's actually going to do is just take this and show you how easy it is to add another GUI item to that sample extension. Just basically add like another tab or something like that where you can build it out. All the GUI information per extension is going to be self-contained in each extension so that you don't have to, like I said, go back in your libraries and start changing things. The GUI is basically set up listening, saying, hey, do you want to add another tab? Do you want to add something else? And what tool do you want to add it to? Did it?
Yeah. So it's not defined, JTEX.
Do you have the JTEX area added up top?
So you just tell him I'm just fixing something.
He's just fixing something real quick, modified from other code. You can see for the most part when we start opening these things that we're able to get extensions pretty much done in under 100 lines of code for the most part. Some of the ones where we're seeing limitations, where we're trying to adapt, like when we showed the blind SQL injection extension, we're basically trying to replicate what Intruder does. We're trying to identify all parameter names and values and basically mark those out and then send a payload to it. So that's kind of our way, being that we don't have a lot of good functionality with Intruder. That's our way to kind of cheat it and utilize it. And you don't really have a lot of good visibility into the responses. So what we're doing as workarounds are looking at things like response content length, to try and get at least a confidence rating on if the response is different and should there actually be manual review. Sending it to repeater or something like that so that you can actually go in and take a look and validate what the extension might potentially be flagging. Oh, well, anyway, we don't want to add libraries up to the top or import swing. So we're going to move on back to the presentation. Right? Yeah. So that kind of concludes the demos where we at least try to show you a sample, try to demo some of the extensions showing, hey, you do have control over a final outbound extension. Little tiny things like one, being able to add items into Target through such things as calling a Google site, doing a little bit of Google indexing. You can even add words to it, like look for .back with a Google site, and it'll add those. So you can do a little bit of Google hacking now within Burp Suite. Obviously, full request modification, trying to show that with a SQL injection tester, where we're actually taking a full request, breaking it down, and doing whatever functionality we need to do to perform our task, and then pushing it out on the wire. And Yeah. Sure. Or no, I'm on the next one, right? Because you did the demo. Oh yeah, you want to?
Yeah. So basically, yeah, sorry about that. I pulled a bunch of GUI code that was calling functions that didn't exist, and we don't have time to go through it. But basically, what's next that we want? We're communicating with Python to Java. Currently, we can go from Java to Java, obviously, and we can implement it in the framework, but all the dynamic code that I added that was pulling all the extensions, it's going to take a while to basically add more code to dynamically pull the Java one. So soon, you can write it in Java if you really want to. We want to also increase GUI configuration. So as an example, kind of like just everything like adding buttons, adding tabs, instead of having the user have to learn Python and play with Java and play with Python, maybe just kind of like make little functions that they can include and be like add tab, add button, add whatever, and just put the arguments in there. So it'll just make it easier for you if you don't have any Java experience. Obviously, optimization of code. We just found out like 2 weeks ago that we're speaking here, and so I did a lot of code in like 2 weeks and got it up and running. I don't know how clean it is. You guys can yell at me over Twitter about it if you really want to, but we're going to be optimizing it and cleaning it up for the future. We want to do live refreshing. I don't know if you noticed that every time I made a modification, I had to close Burp out and reopen it. And yeah, we want to basically remove that. So either there'll be a button or it will just like, yeah, anything where you can drag and drop and not actually close your actual Burp session, but just it will update it and include it and this live. And better control of output. Right now we print to the log tab, and somebody can basically write to the file if they want to, and they just write it in Python, but just something easier so they can choose like which ones they want to do, which ones they want to print to, and have functions to go from there. And then obviously more extensions and more contributors. This whole idea is we look at something like Metasploit, and the community took it and ran with it, and it's obviously doing great. Nmap scriptability engine, people are just writing scripts for it. It's running great. Burp's had extensibility for like 2 years or something, and there's like maybe 4 extensions you can find on the internet. It just like doesn't make sense, you know? And everybody we talk to that do web app pen testing or pen testing in general, they'll basically say that Burp is their go-to weapon, but they're not using extensions. So I don't know if they're just spending a lot of time manually testing everything else. I don't know.
So in conclusion, we're kind of thinking about this whole thing as a rule of supply and demand. Obviously, one of the reasons why people use Burp Suite is it is constantly being updated. I mean, this thing, they're pushing out new versions, every couple months, and it's actually with functionality that you would utilize. So we've been been told that demand is taken into consideration when new functionalities are being built. So I keep pushing, open up extensibility, and it's like, well, that's great, but you're willing, you guys are the only people using it. If there's more demand for it, I bet you would see a lot more extensibility. So if the demand comes, I'm guessing what's going to happen is he's going to be able to open some stuff up and give us some more options. Our observations on options that we would kind of like to start having come in are all requests actually from the extensions themselves should go through a tool extension. Currently, right now, if an extension makes a request, it goes through the tool repeater, and that can be a little bit difficult with kind of keeping things separated. Right. So one of the options that you do have with extensibility is being able to determine what tool. You could pick a tool and say, for proxy, do this functionality. For Spider, do this functionality. So being able to separate repeater items and items that are actually called from your extension would be beneficial. Obviously, we would like to have increased access to intruder scan results, at least with input, right? Like if we're flagging vulnerabilities with our extensions, it'd be pretty cool to be able to add them into the report with the request and response, so that you can still go through your verification, methodology. And then, as easy as adding simple methods to assist with handling request responses. Examples would be get method, just letting us know whether it's a get or post. We're kind of using some crude methods of doing that right now. So it is a simple thing, and it'd be nice if it's just built in natively and you can have access to it all the time. The other one would be get response time, right? So if you're doing blind SQL injection attacks with like wait for delay, we're doing something crude within our extensions, like literally setting time and counting how long it takes for the response to come back. Well, if Burp's kind of chugging along, there could be a huge delay by the time it pushes it back to the extension. So if he's able to actually, as it's being pushed out, the clock is running from that to the actual Burp receiving the response, and we can see that time would be actually quite beneficial. So other things that would kind of nice to happen is participation. Start going out there, downloading some of these extensions that are out there and trying them. Ours are going to be released very shortly. When we first got here, luckily our employer likes to come to us and remind us that we need some open source licensing on all of our code, and we're like, oh, okay. There goes releasing it today, right? So we're going to go populate all that information out there so that we can get our code out and let you guys play around with our extension framework as soon as possible. Obviously endorsing and contributing to the new community forum. One of the things that we first wanted to do when we started this talk was build it more on a campaign, right, of getting more people to do this stuff. And we even went out, got our own domain, like burpextensions.com, and we were going to set up a forum, et cetera, et cetera. And literally within days of submitting our talk information, boom, here comes a new forum up on portswigger.net. So we don't want to create our own anymore. We'd kind of rather embrace what's going on. The ultimate goal is to get people to use this. So from this point, if it's there and it's being done by the actual developer, we want to kind of embrace it. So get on those forums and start sharing some information. Blog posts. Tips, tricks, workarounds. Half the stuff I know is either stuff I found out just by, literally going through Burp on a daily basis, or, a mentor kind of shows you a cool little trick and you have it to yourself. And I've even tried Googling some of these tricks that I know of, and I don't even see them online. So one of the things that we really wanted to do, time wasn't going to be an option here, was do a lot of tips and tricks. So one of the first things we're going to do is on our website just start doing a couple days worth of blog posts of, hey, this is what we're doing with Intruder, this is what we're doing when we're handled, when we get handed kind of this issue, or this is what we do with web service testing kind of thing, and get a lot of information out there so that other people can be using it. And hopefully what will follow is information that I can read that other people are doing that's gonna teach me something new. Finally, the end. We'd obviously like to thank David Roberts. He was the first person who did the basically Java to Burp using Jython gateway. So we are using his framework. You open up the code, look at it. It's very there's really not a lot of ways to write it. We're using it. It works absolutely fantastic, so we're going to continue to do it. Obviously, any pre-testers, consultants at IOActive really helped us out. Things can get a little madness when you're passing a lot of instances of classes and you're going back and forth, so it was really nice to have them for us to utilize. My dog, BB, because she's awesome, and obviously Sterling Mallory Archer for his great wisdom with helping us with our extensions.
And just to add in on the last slide, Daft and Portswigger have actually been extremely proactive developers. There have been countless things that we've emailed them about and that have been implemented in versions of Burp now. And even when we went ahead and submitted our outline for this talk and we showed it to him, he actually went ahead and warned us, hey guys, I saw that you had that feature, you're going to release that extension. I implemented it. It's going to be out in about a week or two, just an FYI. So yeah, he's been proactive. We've emailed him with him a lot. Super awesome, super cool dude. So yeah, if there's anything in Burp that you want, email him, tell him about it. And especially for you guys with extensions and framework stuff, Like yesterday, I was talking to a lot of people, and they aren't developers. Like they have never done anything like that, and they don't want to touch it. But they have ideas, and they have stuff that they want Burp to do. Make a forum post. Say, I want to request this extension. Like, hit me up on Twitter or something, or LinkedIn. Just let me know, and I'll write it. I don't care. I mean, for the last like 2-3 weeks, I've been writing so much framework stuff. I've kind of lost track of what I wanted to actually add to Burp. So, yeah, that's really it.
So ending with that, we also, what we wanted to do while we kind of have everyone's attention is kind of get some statistical information out there. I ended up tweeting it. I'll go put it on like Burp extensions. Hopefully Bsides LV will just tweet it for us or something. But we do kind of have a little survey. How, are people out there doing this kind of stuff? If not, what's preventing you from doing it, right? We'd kind of like to know, because we want people to start using this, using extensibility and sharing their lessons learned, basically, with it. So if you're not doing it, why, and what would you like to see? And all stats that we get, like, we hope to actually share this information so we can actually see, are we accurate? Is there 99% using it and only 1% out there kind of sharing it? So that pretty much concludes our talk. Are there any questions? Questions? Yes.
I can't hear.
I'm sorry, what was that?
You're showing a lot of processing investments. Are you passing everything that would go through a regular extension, like
Right. So her question was basically like, what are we passing? We are passing a lot of information. Are we passing things like load state and save state? It really depends on what it is, right? So if it's a request response, the actual entire message info is being passed, and that you have method calls to that, like get URL, get host, get request, get response. There's basically other method functionality as far as save state and things like that. You wouldn't necessarily save state to an individual request response instance. It would be kind of from a global side. So all that functionality is on the global side. But yes, you can preload individual configurations. You can have it save state. You can even set a timer so it's saving state every couple hours. I know that Burp is automatically doing that, but you can kind of have save states within your own individual text files. So yeah, all method calls that are available to you from Burp extensions is currently still able to be utilized within our framework. Anybody else? Yes. For Spider? So his question was, we're spidering basically some websites with our extensions, and what are the limitations as far as spidering with the extension? And there's for the most part really not. The only main issue with spidering is what you're passing is just the URL. So if it's a post object, you don't really want to start with a post object because it's just going to hand the generic URL through the spider. But we do automate. So for instance, we also have tools in our framework that are outside of the extensions themselves. An example of this would be handling things from Nmap, right? So when you're scanning, let's say, an internal Class B network with Nmap, you could take that GNmap, the greppable Nmap file, load it through one of our scripts, supply it with keywords such as 80, 443, IAS, Apache, and it's going to spit out IP and port, a list of it that will basically then, as arguments, import into Burp, and then we'll actually have it parse that information, add those IPs with their ports into scope, and then give you the option of starting Spider on each and every one of those. So you can kind of like, go get coffee or whatever you need to do while it's just spinning all of your items in scope. Anybody else?
One more.
What's that? Right, so his question was, are there any plans to add Ruby support? Do you want I'm a Python coder and here's my, I'm going to say something bad about Ruby, or no, it would be really cool, right? So I was thinking about it, what if you literally just had your main controller still natively built in Java, and then it's utilizing both Ruby and Python implementations. I don't know if that's necessarily possible, but why not? If you're going to collaborate and bring things together, why not do it as much as possible? At the current point, we know that being able to run extensions with our framework in both Java and in Python are, you're able to do it. As far as also adding Ruby, I really don't know, but it's definitely something that's worth looking into for the three of them out there.
Actually, I was talking to my buddy David Shaw from Redspin yesterday, and he's a huge Ruby guy, and he wants to basically add Ruby support to this also. And at first I was like, dude, do you really want to slow down a Java app even more? Like, come on, dude. Like, have you ran Metasploit before? Like, you want to wait 10 minutes for it to start? But no, we're going to go ahead and implement that, and it should be here soon, hopefully.
There's nothing wrong with Ruby.
There's lots of things wrong with Ruby. I'm a Perl guy. My cat walks on the keyboard. It makes code.
Yep, that's it. Thank you, guys.